Let me tell you something about loneliness. It doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps in, slow and silent, until one day, even the sound of your own breath feels like company. My Victorian mansion on Pine Street had once been filled with life, laughter, footsteps on the stairs, and the smells of Sunday dinners wafting from the kitchen. Now it felt more like a museum. And I was its centerpiece, a relic, polished and forgotten, gathering dust while the world moved on without me. 78 years is no joke. I'd grown used to the creaking of my own joints, the stiffness in my fingers when I woke up, and the irregular thump of my heart, more erratic now than the grandfather clock in the living room. But the silence, that I could never get used to. That Sunday, I sat by the window watching the sunspots creep across the parquet floor, letting memory do what time tried to erase. Sundays used to sound different, full of voices, laughter, the clinking of dishes. Roland would carve the meat at the table with exaggerated ceremony while the children bickered about something silly. I used to watch it all with a smile, a woman who knew she was loved, needed, irreplaceable. Now I just sat there, Eloise Pembroke, widow of an oil tycoon, forgotten by the very children I once built my life around. Roland had been gone 12 years. A heart attack, sudden and cruel, took him during a business trip to Denver. He was 10 years older than me, yet he always seemed so robust, so alive. Unlike the other men in his social circle, he had never strayed, never gambled away a fortune, never drank too much. His one true passion had been his work, investing in oil fields, and I admired him for that. We'd met in Boston, at a charity event. I was 22, fresh out of college, working in a library. Roland, already a prominent businessman, had donated a hefty sum for a new wing. He spotted me in the crowd and refused to leave my side all evening. "You have whiskey-colored eyes in the candlelight," he said. Corny, perhaps. But when Roland said it, it felt like poetry. 6 months later, we were married. A year after that, we moved to Sheridan, Wyoming, into the sprawling mansion with its columns, stained-glass windows, 5 bedrooms, and its very own library. "We'll need room for all the kids," he'd said. And children did come. First Montgomery, then 2 years later, Beatrice. There's a photo on the mantel. Me, Roland, and the children on the porch of this very house. Montgomery was 6, Beatrice 4. Roland's hand rested on our son's shoulder while I held our daughter close. All smiles. None of us knew that one day I'd be sitting alone in that same house, wondering how it all unraveled. Beatrice left the moment she graduated high school. "Mom, there's no future in this town," she'd said, suitcase in hand. She went to UCLA, fell for an environmental activist, got married, and now lives in Portland with 3 children and a nonprofit to her name. She calls once a month. Visits for Christmas, though not every year. And then there's Montgomery. My firstborn. My soft spot. My mistake, perhaps. I always gave him more than his sister. Roland saw him as his successor, but I adored him blindly. He never had to ask. I could read his needs before he voiced them. I sent him to the best schools, the best camps, paid for trips abroad. When he didn't get into Yale, Roland was crushed. I consoled our son, told him not everyone was cut out for academics. When he dropped out of community college, I said he was just finding himself. Roland, ever the realist, put him to work in the company. "Let him learn the value of money," he insisted. Montgomery lasted 3 months. Then came the fashion boutique. I funded it. It failed within 6. Then it was a restaurant. Then real estate. Each time, he came to me with those eyes, the same ones that used to plead for extra dessert as a child, and I couldn't say no. After Roland died, Montgomery began visiting more often. At first, I thought it was grief. In time, I understood. He was waiting. Roland had left everything to me, with a stipulation that it would be divided equally among the children after my death. A wise move. He understood Montgomery better than I ever could. 5 years ago, Montgomery married Odelia Crump. His second marriage. Her third. A beautiful woman, always dressed like she stepped out of a catalog. Her eyes were cold, her nails perfect, and her disdain for me barely veiled. She worked in luxury real estate and looked at me like I was an antique that ought to be auctioned off. After Odelia came into his life, my son's visits became rarer. Once every few months, never for long. A perfunctory, "How are you, Mom?" before he glanced at his watch. Last year, he forgot my birthday entirely. When he remembered a week later, he sent flowers and a $500 gift card to a boutique I'd never heard of. The grandchildren? Beatrice's boys, Montgomery's daughter from his first marriage. They came when they needed something. Money for college. A down payment. A vacation. I always said yes. It was the only way I got to see them. That afternoon, the living room clock chimed 3 times. Medication time. I rose slowly, knees aching, breath tight. Dr. Hayworth blamed it on age, but I knew better. My heart was breaking in slow motion. My kitchen table looked like a pharmacy, pills sorted by time of day, each bottle a quiet sentinel of what age does to a body. As I washed down the pills, I saw Eunice Thorpe outside, tending her garden. She was 65, widowed 3 years ago. She came by sometimes, brought me gossip, talked about her daughter Evelyn, a nurse at Sheridan Hospital. Aside from the housekeepers, Eunice was my only regular visitor. The phone rang, sudden and loud. I jumped, spilling water. Montgomery's name flashed on the screen. "Mom, it's me." "Hello, darling. How are you?" "Of course, you should come over." "I'd be glad to." And I was. I always was. No matter what, he was my son. I rushed to the kitchen, asked Martha to make his favorite coffee, laid out those cookies he used to love as a boy. Then I went to the bathroom, fixed my hair, put on some lipstick. I stared into the mirror, wrinkles around my eyes and mouth, gray hair twisted into a neat bun. Roland always said I was aging beautifully. I wondered what he'd say now. Montgomery arrived 40 minutes later. Impeccably dressed, as usual. Tweed jacket, expensive watch, sleek glasses. He kissed me on the cheek, barely, and sat down. "How are you, Mom?" "I'm fine, darling. How are you? How's Odelia?" "She's great. We're planning a Mediterranean cruise, 2 weeks, 11 countries." He talked about luxury liners, Michelin-starred restaurants, and exotic excursions. I smiled, nodded. He didn't ask about me, my health, how I passed my days. I already knew why he'd come. "Mom, remember the boutique hotel project I told you about? My partner and I are so close. We just need a little more capital to finish renovations." There it was again. Another idea. Another ask. I let him speak. Projections, profits, investors, buzzwords. I didn't stop him. I didn't have the heart. 800,000. Just this last bit, I promise. I'll pay you back in 6 months. With interest. I said nothing. Just rose, walked into my office, and opened my checkbook. I wrote him a check for $100,000. I knew it would vanish, like all the rest. But I handed it to him anyway. Because he was my son. Because it was the only way I'd see him again. He thanked me profusely. Kissed my cheek again. Promised to visit next week. We both knew he wouldn't. After he left, the silence returned, heavier than before. I went back to my chair by the window, watched the sun dip lower in the sky, and let the house swallow me whole. The sunspots had already drifted up the wall. The day, like my life, was slipping into twilight. That's when it happened, suddenly and without mercy. A sharp, twisting pain gripped my chest. It wasn't the dull, lingering ache I'd grown accustomed to. It was piercing, clenched like a fist of iron. It spread up my left arm, then wrapped around my neck like a noose. I gasped, trying to call out for Martha, but my voice betrayed me. It wouldn't come. My body trembled as dark spots scattered across my vision like ink dropped in water. Somehow, fumbling, I found my cell phone buried in the pocket of my robe and managed to dial 911. A voice crackled through the speaker. Emergency services. What's your emergency? I'm in pain. My chest. I choked out the words, but the rest unraveled into darkness. When I woke, all I could hear was the steady, artificial beeping of machines. Their rhythm was steady, unlike my own faltering heart. I opened my eyes to see Dr. Hayworth standing at my bedside, clipboard in hand, fatigue carved into his features. "Mrs. Pembroke," he said gently, "you suffered a massive heart attack." He explained the results of the tests, the severity, the risks. My arteries were clogged, my aorta compromised. The only option was immediate bypass surgery. His voice was calm, clinical, but the words fell like stones. My thoughts were clouded, jumbled, but through the fog one instinct pierced clear: call the children. I reached for my phone with trembling fingers. Beatrice answered on the second ring. Her voice cracked when she heard the news. "Mommy, I'll come as soon as I can," she sobbed. "But it won't be for another week. Oliver has important exams. I just can't leave him now." Her voice was warm, regretful, but firm. Oliver, her eldest son, had always come first. I understood. I said I did. She promised to call every day. And to her credit, she did. Montgomery didn't answer. I left a message, then followed it with a text. His reply came 2 hours later. "Mom just heard. How are you? Very busy right now. I'll come by tomorrow." But tomorrow came and went. So did the next day. On the third morning, I called again. My voice was frail, stripped of all its old strength. "Montgomery," I said, "the doctors have scheduled the surgery. It's next week. I'm scared, son. Can you come?" There was a long pause. Then his voice, smooth and distant. "Mom, I'm going through a really stressful time right now. This hotel is eating up all my energy. And Odelia and I already paid for a cruise. The tickets are non-refundable." A cruise. I was silent. The surgery, the one they described in such grave terms, was in just a week. "We leave the day after tomorrow," he added casually. "It's the best hospital in the state. You'll be fine." That's when something inside me tore, not with the violence of heartbreak, but the quiet finality of surrender. The last thread holding together my illusions snapped. I let go. "Of course, son," I said, my voice thin. "I understand. Get some rest." A nurse came in then, breaking the silence I hadn't realized was drowning me. A young woman, no older than 30, with tired eyes and a gentle face. "Mrs. Pembroke, are you okay? Are you crying?" I wiped my cheeks quickly. "Oh, it's nothing, dear. Just old age. Makes fools of us all." She sat gently at the edge of my bed and took my hand with a warmth I hadn't felt in months. "My name is Evelyn Thorpe. I'm your neighbor's daughter, Eunice. She asked me to check on you." Now I recognized her, the girl from the framed pictures in Eunice's parlor. "Evelyn. Of course. Thank you. Your mother's very kind." "She's worried about you," Evelyn said softly. "She told me you live alone in that big house. And your kids." "My daughter's in Portland," I replied, hesitating. "And my son." I let the sentence dissolve. Evelyn nodded. She didn't need details. She worked here. She saw it all the time. People like me. The elderly left behind, reduced to phone calls and forgotten birthdays. That night, I watched the hospital's small TV. A news report showed a luxury cruise setting sail across the Mediterranean. Passengers smiled, lifting champagne glasses to the camera. There they were, Montgomery and Odelia, climbing the gangway in designer sunglasses, beaming like a couple from a glossy travel magazine. The camera caught their faces perfectly. Not a shadow of worry touched them. Not one flicker of thought for the woman lying in a sterile hospital room, the woman who had given him life, who had given everything. The morning before the surgery dawned brighter than usual for Sheridan. Golden rays filtered through the blinds, forming warm stripes on the floor. I lay in bed, staring at them, willing myself to be calm. Dr. Hayworth came in at 8 sharp, holding my chart, his silver hair mussed and his eyes already weary. "How are you feeling today, Mrs. Pembroke?" "As a woman my age might feel on the eve of heart surgery," I replied with a faint smile. "Tolerable, doctor. I just want it to be over." He listened to my lungs, scribbled notes. "The surgical team is excellent," he reassured me. "You're in the best hands." A gentle knock interrupted us. Evelyn peeked in, holding a small basket covered in a linen napkin. "Good morning," she said with a smile that brightened the room. "Mom sent cookies. And the new issue of the Sheridan Press. I figured you could use something to read." She set the basket on the table and sat beside me. I felt an unexpected wave of warmth. "Your mother's always been so attentive," I murmured. "She's very fond of you," Evelyn said. She wasn't conventionally beautiful, her features too broad, her chin slightly heavy, but her eyes shone with sincerity, and her presence filled the sterile room with something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. "She's worried," Evelyn continued. "How are you really feeling?" "I'm fine," I replied. But the words stuck. I sighed. "It's not just the surgery, Evelyn. It's the loneliness." She reached for my hand again. "You're not alone. I'll be here. Before and after. My shift covers both days." She smiled. "Call me if you need anything." "Please, call me Eloise," I said, surprised at how grateful I felt. She nodded, her smile soft. "Are you waiting for someone to call?" she asked gently, noticing my frequent glances at the phone on the nightstand. "My son," I admitted. "He said he'd call before they boarded the ship." She nodded, her smile soft. "Are you waiting for someone to call?" she asked gently, noticing my frequent glances at the phone on the nightstand. "My son," I admitted. "He said he'd call before they boarded the ship." "The cruise," she murmured. I saw the flicker in her eyes, though she didn't say anything else. "He's very busy," I said quickly, as if I owed Montgomery an apology. "He's starting a new project." "Of course," she said, her voice kind. But her eyes held a different question. What could possibly be more important? When she left, promising to return after lunch, I lay back on the pillows, staring at the ceiling. And suddenly, the past came rushing back, not as regret, but as vivid memory. Montgomery at 6, sobbing with a scraped knee. "Mommy, kiss it so it doesn't hurt." And I did. And it worked, because he believed it would. Montgomery at 12, showing off his medal from the school swim meet. I was always there. Every game. Every recital. I remember his proud face as he scanned the crowd and found me clapping. At 16, when he crashed Roland's car and came to me trembling, eyes wide. "Mom, don't tell Dad." I paid for the repairs out of my own savings. Not a word to Roland. At 20, he called me from college in the middle of the night. "Mom, I'm in trouble. I need money." I never asked what for. I just sent the money. Then I found out it was gambling debts. The money I'd wired in the middle of the night, gone to blackjack tables and poker hands. Roland would have been furious. I hid it from him, like I hid so many things. I kept protecting Montgomery long after he stopped deserving protection. He was 25 when he introduced me to Helena. "Mom, this is Helena. We're in love." She was delicate, blonde, with wide, innocent eyes that made her look like she'd stepped out of a romance novel. I gave them a garden wedding, lavender and white petals on the lawn, a quartet playing under the arbor, everything perfect. I paid for the honeymoon in Hawaii, too. I wanted it to last, to matter. Montgomery was in his 30s when he returned to my doorstep with a suitcase and heartbreak. "Mom, we broke up. Can I stay with you for a while?" He stayed for 8 months. I made him his favorite meals, washed his shirts, sat beside him on the porch as he grieved a marriage I'd funded and supported with all my heart. Then came another idea, another business. "Mom, it's a win-win. Will you invest?" And I did. Over and over. Every time. I wanted to believe in him, needed to believe in him. At 38, he introduced me to Odelia. "She's the one, Mom. I've been searching all my life." She was beautiful, yes, but cold. Polished to perfection like one of the marble countertops she sold in luxury real estate. I smiled when they announced their engagement, even as my instincts screamed. Her handshake was limp, her smile empty. I had given my son everything: time, love, money, pieces of myself I never got back. And what did I get in return? My phone buzzed, snapping me from memory. My heart leapt. Montgomery, finally. But no. It was Beatrice. "Mom, how are you? Oliver passed his exams. I'm booking a flight for next week. Hang in there. Love you." I smiled, swallowing a lump in my throat. I typed back, "I'm fine, darling. Don't worry. The surgery is simple. Give your grandchildren a kiss." Simple. I tried to believe that word. Tried to make it true for my daughter's sake. But even Dr. Hayworth had been blunt. The odds are good, but there are no guarantees. I was 78, and my body had carried the burden of decades. The clock showed nearly noon. Montgomery's flight was scheduled for 2. I stared at my phone, waiting, hoping. Surely he'd call. Surely he wouldn't just vanish. A knock came. I looked up, expecting Evelyn, but it was her mother. "Eloise, darling," Eunice said softly, and came to my bed, arms outstretched. She hugged me gently. "Evelyn only told me yesterday. I had no idea." Eunice was slightly plump, with soft gray curls pulled into a simple bun. We'd been neighbors for 15 years, but we'd only grown close after our husbands died. That's how it happens. Grief becomes a bridge. "Sit down, Eunice," I said, patting the chair. "Thank you for the cookies, and for asking Evelyn to keep an eye on me." "Oh, it's nothing," she waved it off. "We're neighbors. And Evelyn works here anyway." We chatted about little things: the weather, our gardens, the new organic grocery store that had opened downtown. It was the kind of easy, forgettable conversation between two old women, but it felt good. Human. Real. Then her voice dipped. "Where are your children?" she asked. "Is Beatrice still in Portland?" "Yes. She'll be here next week. After my surgery." I paused. Her son had important exams. "And Montgomery?" I looked away. He has a trip planned. With Odelia. A cruise. The Mediterranean. Eunice didn't respond right away. She simply reached over and placed her hand on mine. "Eloise," she said gently, "it's all right." I tried to smile. "I understand. The tickets were probably paid for. Everything booked in advance. But still," she said softly but firmly, "he should be here. To support you. To hold your hand." I didn't answer. I couldn't. After she left, I sat in silence. The minutes crawled toward 2 o'clock. They brought lunch, rubbery chicken and watery mashed potatoes, but I barely touched it. At 1:45, I couldn't stand it any longer. I dialed Montgomery myself. Ringing. More ringing. Then finally he answered. The background was loud, chaotic, airport announcements, rolling luggage, voices shouting in multiple languages. Mom, I'm at the airport. It's not really a good time. Montgomery, I said quickly, I just wanted to hear your voice. Before the surgery. Yeah, sure, he replied, distracted. Listen, we're boarding. I've gotta go. You're in good hands. You'll be fine. It's just… Mom, I'm sorry. Odelia's already walking to the gate. I'll call you when we get back, okay? Have a good rest. I swallowed hard. Thank you. Feel better, he added quickly and hung up. I stared at the phone, hollowed out. No, I love you. No, good luck. Not even a real goodbye. Then, 5 minutes later, a message. I opened it, desperate for something better. Instead, I saw, handle your illness yourself. By 8 words. Cold, sharp, merciless, thrown at me like trash. It wasn't just a text, it was the last splinter of hope snapping in half. I stared out the window as clouds drifted lazily by, and I remembered it all. Every check, every rescue. College, $30,000 a year for 4 years. First failed business, $50,000. Wedding to Helena, $20,000. Divorce from Helena, $10,000 to lawyers. Second business failure, $70,000. Third, $90,000. Debts I paid quietly, even hiding them from Roland. Cars, apartments, more loans, more bailouts. But it wasn't just money. How many plans did I cancel when he needed me? How many nights did I sit up, listening, soothing, forgiving? How many times did I choose him over Roland, even when Roland was right? And now, handle your illness yourself. Bye. Evelyn returned that afternoon, as promised. She immediately sensed it. Eloise, she said gently, you look upset. What happened? I handed her my phone without a word. She read the message. Her lips thinned. She gave the phone back. That's it, she said. That was all. That's how it is, I echoed. We sat in silence. Then she asked, cautiously, what are you going to do? I sighed. What can I do? He's my son. I love him, no matter what. But that doesn't mean he gets to treat you like this, she said, softly but firmly. And she was right. Loving someone doesn't mean becoming their doormat. I had lived a long life. I had earned better than this. You know, I said after a moment, you're right. There is something I can do. I picked up my phone and found a number I hadn't dialed in years. Who are you calling? Evelyn asked. Theodore Garland, I replied. Old friend of Roland's, and our family notary. Her eyebrows rose in surprise, but she didn't interrupt. Theodore answered on the 3rd ring. His voice was exactly as I remembered, low, warm, gravelly. Theodore Garland speaking. Theodore. It's Eloise Pembroke. I need to change my will. It's urgent. That night, sleep never came. I lay in the dim half-light of my room, listening to the hospital's hum, the soft beeping of monitors, the footsteps of nurses, the occasional distant cough. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. When I had called Theodore, he'd tried to dissuade me. Eloise, your surgery is tomorrow. Shouldn't you focus on your health? I need this done, I told him. I need to know if something happens to me, that things will be handled the right way. He'd agreed. Promised to come before the operation. At 5 a.m., Evelyn entered quietly. Her shift had just begun. She came straight to my bedside. "You're awake," she said, seeing my eyes open. I couldn't sleep. Too many thoughts. She adjusted my pillows, checked my four. "It's normal to be nervous. But you're in good hands. Dr. Hayworth is the best in the state, and I'll be assisting him." That surprised me. "You'll be in the OR?" "Yes," she smiled. "Cardiology's my specialty. I asked to be on your case." A wave of emotion washed over me. Gratitude, sadness, something between the two. "Thank you, Evelyn," I whispered. She nodded. We didn't need words. At 7 o'clock, the pre-operative rituals began. Blood pressure checks, temperature, forms to sign, questions from the anesthesiologist. I moved through it all in a daze. At 8:30, a knock on the ward door. Theodore Garland walked in, tall and elegant, a leather briefcase in hand. He looked unchanged, even at 70, brisk, composed, perceptive. "Eloise," he greeted me, squeezing my hand gently. "Are you sure about this?" "I'm sure," I replied. "Sit. We've got work to do." He opened the folder, took out my current will. Everything split between Montgomery and Beatrice. Education funds for the grandkids. That's how it stood since Roland passed. "I want to change it. Completely." He hesitated. "This is a big step. Are you sure this isn't a reaction?" "I've been thinking about it for 12 years, I said quietly. "Yesterday was just the last straw." I showed him Montgomery's message. He read it. His jaw tightened. "I understand. What do you want changed?" I straightened up. "I want Evelyn Thorpe to have the house. And the bulk of the estate." His eyes widened. "Your neighbor's daughter?" "She's the only one who's been here for me. She'll be holding my heart in her hands today. My son will be holding a cocktail." He nodded slowly. "And Beatrice?" "She gets the antique book collection. And a small sum. Her kids, $10,000 each." "And Montgomery?" I smiled. "The family crypt. At Mountain View Cemetery. Since they're in such a hurry to bury me, let them have it." Theodore let out a short laugh. "Eloise," he said, "you've always had style." The knock came just as the morning light slipped quietly through the blinds, casting long stripes across the clean hospital floor. I blinked a few times, still adjusting to being awake, and sat up carefully, feeling the dull ache in my chest. Constant now, but no longer terrifying. "Come in," I said, my voice steady. The door opened slowly, and there he was. Montgomery. My son. He looked tired, though his clothes were crisp, his hair freshly styled, and his shoes polished to a gleam. Behind him, Odelia hovered like a shadow, immaculate, expressionless, holding a bouquet of expensive white orchids that looked like they had been purchased out of guilt rather than love. He stepped inside with a forced smile. "Hi, Mom." I didn't smile back. I simply nodded, gesturing to the chair beside my bed. "You're here," I said evenly. "We came straight from the airport," he said, glancing around the room as if inspecting it for flaws. "How are you feeling?" "Better than expected." I kept my eyes on his, watching for the usual signs, the flicker of calculation, the practiced sympathy. "I was worried," he said, but the words lacked conviction. Odelia set the orchids down on the bedside table with a polished grace. "We thought it was important to be here, even if things have been a bit hectic," she added. I looked at her then, straight into those icy, perfumed eyes. "Thank you, Odelia." "That's very generous of you." My tone made it clear I knew the gesture was hollow. Montgomery sat down, exhaling slowly. "Listen, Mom." I spoke to Theodore. He refused to tell me anything, but His tone sharpened, a flare of his real reason for being there surfacing. He said you've made some changes to the will. I folded my hands in my lap and met his stare. Yes, I have. He blinked, caught off guard by my bluntness. What? Why? You didn't even talk to me. You didn't talk to anyone. I don't understand. No, Montgomery, I said softly but firmly. You don't. That's the entire problem. He leaned forward, his voice growing tight. Mom, if this is about the hotel or the cruise or anything Odelia and I. It's about everything, I interrupted. The years of silence. The visits only when you wanted something. The businesses I funded. The lies. The message you sent me before my surgery. Montgomery's face darkened. You were emotional. It was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. It was the truth, wasn't it? I tilted my head slightly. You told me to handle my illness myself. So I did. I handled everything myself, including my estate. Odelia stepped closer, her voice suddenly taking on that rehearsed charm I knew too well. Eloise, I think we're all just a bit raw from the circumstances. I'm sure whatever changes you've made. Odelia, I said evenly, this conversation is between a mother and her son. She went quiet, lips pressed into a thin, offended line, and stepped back again. Montgomery looked stunned. You left it to that nurse, didn't you? Evelyn. The one who's been caring for you. I nodded. Yes. I left the house and the inheritance to her. She's shown me more compassion in 3 weeks than you have in 3 decades. This is insane, he burst out. You're being manipulated, Mom. You're not thinking clearly. Maybe the surgery, the medication. I raised a hand. Stop. Don't insult my intelligence. I made the changes before the surgery. Fully aware, fully lucid, fully heartbroken. You'll get a copy of the will once it's filed. You're welcome to contest it. I expect you will. But you won't win. His mouth opened and closed, rage simmering in his eyes. You're punishing me. No, I said quietly. I'm liberating myself. Odelia grabbed his arm. Montgomery, we should go. We've said what we needed to say. He stood up reluctantly, as if every part of him wanted to argue, to shout, to demand, but something in my gaze must have warned him there would be no more capitulations. Not this time. As they turned to leave, I said, Montgomery. He looked back, hope flickering briefly across his face. I loved you more than anything. I still do. But love without respect, without kindness, it dies. He stood frozen for a moment. Then he nodded once, stiffly, and walked out with Odelia. When the door closed behind them, I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The room seemed lighter, as if years of disappointment had just walked out with him. Later that afternoon, Evelyn arrived for her shift, smiling as she stepped in. You had visitors? I nodded. Yes. Everything all right? I looked at her, at the gentle eyes, the quiet strength, the warmth she carried like a lantern in the dark. It is now. She came over, took my hand, and squeezed it. You're healing well, Eloise. Inside and out. I smiled, truly smiled. Thanks to you. And I meant it. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Not of the silence in my mansion, not of the legal battles my son might start, not even of dying. Because whatever time I had left would be mine. Truly mine. And I had finally remembered something I'd lost long ago. I mattered too. The sun dipped behind the horizon, casting a soft golden light through the window. I looked out at the fading sky and felt a peace I hadn't known in years. There was still life left in me, real life, and I intended to live it. The clock on my bedside table read just past 9 in the morning. Too early for doctor rounds, too late for the usual breakfast routine. I sat upright, smoothing my hair and pulling the blanket up over my lap with as much composure as I could manage. "Come in," I called softly. The door opened, and there he stood, Montgomery, my only son. But at that moment, he looked like a stranger. His once polished demeanor had crumbled under the weight of something he hadn't anticipated. His shirt was wrinkled, the tan from his cruise already beginning to fade, leaving behind deep shadows under his eyes. His cheeks were peppered with stubble, a rare imperfection for someone so obsessed with appearances. In his arms, he carried a bouquet so massive and mismatched. Roses, lilies, orchids. It looked less like a gesture of love and more like an apology shouted through expensive petals. "Mom," he said, stepping inside and attempting a smile. "How are you?" "Better than expected," I replied, adjusting myself against the pillows. "The doctors say the recovery's going well." He looked relieved, momentarily, but I could see it wasn't concern about my health that troubled him. He set the bouquet down clumsily on the table, unsure of what to do next. I didn't offer to help with the conversation. I waited. Eventually, he bent awkwardly and kissed me on the cheek. "I was so worried," he said. "As soon as I found out the surgery was more serious than you said, I decided to come back." A lie, plain and thin. We both knew he hadn't returned for the surgery. He came because he'd heard the rumors about the will. Still, I nodded as though I believed him. "That's very nice of you," I said. "How's Odelia?" "She's here too." "Well, back in the hotel. There was a rough patch during the cruise and she got seasick. She said to tell you she'll come visit later." Another lie. Odelia never got seasick. She simply didn't care to waste her time on an aging woman who might or might not give her another mansion. She was waiting to assess the outcome. Montgomery sat down beside my bed, making a theatrical show of tucking in my blanket and straightening the edges. It might have been touching if it weren't so performative. "Do you need anything?" he asked. "Fruit. A book." "I have everything," I said, nodding to the basket of fruit from Eunice and the stack of novels Evelyn had brought. His jaw stiffened. He was used to being the only one who gave, or took, anything from me. "Who brought these?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Eunice. And Evelyn." He blinked. "Evelyn, the neighbor's daughter?" "She's a nurse here," I said. "Takes great care of me. I didn't know you two were close. A lot changed while you were on that cruise." There was a pause. Then his voice dropped an octave. "Mom, I've heard some strange rumors." "What kind of rumors?" "About your will. They say you changed it, before the operation. Is that true?" I held his gaze. This was the moment. I took a steady breath. "Yes, it's true." His face twitched. For a moment, he lost his composure, but quickly gathered himself. "But why? I don't understand. We had everything planned." "That's just it," I said. "The surgery made me think. About who really cares. About who I can trust with the life your father and I built." "Are you saying I don't care?" he demanded, his voice rising slightly. "That's not fair, Mom. I have a business, a family, obligations." "I wasn't asking for 24-hour attention," I said calmly. "Just a few days. Before a life-threatening surgery." "The tickets were non-refundable," he exclaimed, then winced, realizing how it sounded. I smiled, nodding. "Of course. The tickets were more important." At that moment, the door opened and Evelyn walked in with a tray of medications. She paused, clearly surprised to see Montgomery. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't know you had company." "It's all right," I told her with a smile. "Montgomery, this is Evelyn Thorpe, the one I was telling you about. Evelyn, this is my son. Montgomery stood quickly, pasting a gracious expression onto his face. It's a pleasure, Miss Thorpe. Thank you for taking care of my mother. I would have, of course, but I've been away on urgent business. I understand, Evelyn said with polite neutrality. Work comes first. Something in her tone unsettled him. He sat back down, eyes now wary, as she checked my vitals with her usual gentle efficiency. She's doing well, Evelyn said as she noted my chart. Dr. Worth will be in later this afternoon. Thank you, dear, I said. How late are you in today? Till 8 p.m., but I can stop by after if you need anything. Montgomery watched our exchange with growing discomfort. When she left, he immediately turned to me. She calls you by your first name? I asked her to, I said. It makes me feel more comfortable. How long have you two been close? Since you boarded that cruise and I was wheeled into surgery. He cringed. You're still mad about that? Everyone has choices, Montgomery, I said softly. You made yours. I made mine. He drummed his fingers on the armrest. Look, he said after a pause, I know I haven't been perfect. Maybe I've been too busy, too distracted, but I love you, Mom. I really do. And I want to help. Odelia, and I think it would be best if you didn't go back to that big empty house. Come live with us while you rebuild. I almost laughed. Me? In Odelia's sterile palace? Where I'd be placed in the farthest corner and treated like a burden. No, thank you. Very kind, I said. But I'm returning home. I've hired a nurse. Evelyn and Eunice will visit. I'll be fine. A nurse, he exclaimed. But that's expensive. I can afford it. But I could help. You're busy, I cut him off. You have a business. Obligations. He bit his lip, realizing he'd walked into his own trap. Mom, can we be honest? What exactly did you change in the will? That's privileged information, I smiled. You can ask Theodore, though I doubt he'll tell you without my permission. But I'm your son. That doesn't entitle you to my decisions. You'll find out in time. Just then, his phone rang. He stepped out into the hallway, but his voice traveled back to me through the thin door. No, not yet. She's not saying much, trying to be sweet, but she's like a wall. Some nurse, neighbor's daughter. They're getting close. Yes, I know what the house is worth. Don't yell at me, I'm trying. 5 minutes later, he re-entered with a plastic smile. Odelia sends her love. How nice, I said. Tell her I appreciate the concern, and tell her that hospital walls are thin. His face twitched. You misunderstood. No. I finally understood. The truth, Montgomery. And I made a decision based on that. What decision? You'll find out. He stood, flustered. I'll come back tomorrow. Maybe bring your favorite pastries. As you wish. Check with Evelyn first to see what I can eat. When he left, I exhaled deeply. The conversation drained me more than any test or injection had. But I felt clean. Free. I had told my son the truth. No sugarcoating, no lies, no self-deception. Later that day, Dr. Worth visited. Excellent progress, he said. If this continues, we'll discharge you in 3 or 4 days. Good news, I smiled. Evelyn came in next with tea and a magazine. Has your son gone? Yes, I nodded. He'll be back tomorrow. He seems caring. I chuckled. Yes, when it benefits him. She hesitated. I didn't mean to pry. It's all right, I said, touching her arm. You've become more family to me than many relatives ever were. That night, just as I was about to sleep, there was a knock at the door. Theodore stepped in, pale and troubled. "I'm sorry I'm late," he said. "But I must tell you what happened." I sat up. "What is it?" "Your son came to my office. First, he tried to convince me you were mentally unstable when you signed the new will. I reminded him of the medical evaluations. And he offered me a bribe, $100,000, to lose the new will and reinstate the old one. I didn't flinch. I wasn't even surprised. And you?" I refused. He yelled. "Threatened lawsuits." I nodded slowly, absorbing it. "Thank you for your honesty, Theodore." He shook his head. "I'm sorry, Eloise. I didn't want to upset you." "You haven't," I said quietly. "You've just confirmed I made the right choice." And as he sat beside me, his presence calm and firm, I knew tomorrow would come. And I would face it, with my eyes open and my heart finally unburdened. I had to call security. The moment felt surreal. Montgomery lunging forward, voice raised, trying one last time to intimidate Theodore. I covered my eyes as if shielding myself could make it less shameful, less absurd. So much for his whispered threats and that pitiful attempt to bribe the notary. It had all been part of his plan. But plans like Montgomery's, woven from arrogance and entitlement, unravel quickly under pressure. He was even more predictable than I had thought. "I'm sorry you had to go through that, Theodore," I said once calm had returned to the room. "You did the right thing." Theodore, ever composed, gave a small nod. "Eloise," he said quietly but seriously, "I must warn you. Your son will not stop. He will look for any way to contest the will." "Let him try," I replied, my voice smooth and unwavering. "You and I followed the law to the letter. Everything is airtight. And besides, I'm not dead yet." I gave a small smile, one I'd earned. I have, hopefully, many more years ahead of me to watch my son attempt to earn back what he threw away. Theodore studied me with a quiet intensity. "You've changed, Eloise. Tougher." "Not tougher," I corrected, shaking my head slowly. "Just no longer blind. When your heart stops on an operating table and you come back, you stop tolerating illusions. It's like a veil is lifted. You see people, yourself, with unflinching clarity." Theodore reached over and squeezed my hand. "No matter what happens next, I'm on your side. Always." After he left, I didn't sleep. My mind spun, not from fear, not even from anger, but from the clarity that had replaced both. I thought of Montgomery, of how quickly his mask had slipped once he realized the inheritance might not be his. And yet I felt no hatred, just an iron resolve to see this to the end. He still believed this was about money. He didn't understand that the true legacy was something far more precious: trust, compassion, integrity. Qualities no sum could purchase, only earn. The months that followed blurred together under the hush of snowfall. Sheridan was blanketed in winter's embrace. The days grew short, the nights long, but in the quiet warmth of my home, I found my rhythm again. I spent many evenings by the fire, listening to its soft crackle, feeling more alive than I had in years. Dr. Hayworth told me my recovery was better than most patients half my age. I was gaining strength, confidence. The cane was still necessary, but I no longer felt like a woman made fragile by circumstance. Ironically, it was in these months that I saw Montgomery more than I had in the last 3 years combined. He and Odelia came every weekend, like clockwork. They brought extravagant gifts: macarons from Paris, teas I couldn't pronounce, scarves I'd never wear, bouquets of rare blooms. They took me to restaurants where the waiters wore gloves, suggested weekend getaways to their country estate, and booked front-row seats to concerts and shows. Every visit was like a performance, carefully choreographed. That Sunday was no different. They arrived just before lunch. Odelia was radiant in a cream cashmere suit, her tan still lingering despite winter. Montgomery, impeccable as ever, wore a charcoal suit and silk tie, his shoes shining like his ambitions. They came bearing expensive chocolates and a bouquet of white roses. "You look beautiful, Mom," Montgomery said, kissing my cheek. "Just like before." "Thank you, darling," I smiled. "Today is a good day."